had dreamed a married couple, looking at a photograph that showed themselves and their son. And while they stared at it, the image of the boy faded away, and the photograph showed only the two of them. And I woke up just wowed by this image from my dream. And it was about 6 a.m., and I lay there and I just thought about it. And I began to weave a story around it.
Yeah, I want the picture of the three of us. What'd you think, that I wouldn't notice? I wouldn't care?
And for me, it always depends on the emotion. It's about tracking the emotion and building the emotion, because I always, whether I'm writing a thriller or a comedy or whatever, to me, the emotional base is the most important part, so that the audience lives it with you and stays with you.
Sometimes the mind needs help in letting a thing go.
You expect me to let go of my son?
I wrote it, gave it to my agent, and he sold it to Revolution in a 24-hour period. So this was the quickest from creation to sale that I've ever had in my career.
As a director, you read so much, and most, unfortunately, so many Hollywood movies just have no soul to them at all. And so to read a thriller with some real feeling to it, you just go, God, let's do it.
I have a child.
This is a wildly speculative film, and Joe would always be wondering about that world. He'd be very diligent to say, well, like, if this is happening, how can you explain that, Jerry? I mean, what is this experiment that's going on? And at what point in the experiment is the memory erased? And he had all these very logical ideas because he wanted to understand so he could convey it on the screen and to the actors.
There's an alien element to the movie. The movie is ultimately, you discover about an alien experiment to see how powerful the bond is between mother and child. And that element, we kept making, we buried it deeper and deeper into the movie so that the audience, for as long as possible, doesn't really know what the ultimate mystery of the movie is.
About a year and a half ago, we got a call from a gentleman named Todd Garner, who's head of production at Revolution Studios, and he said, asked if we were doing a movie in the fall, and we said, well, we weren't. We just finished a couple of movies, and he said, we have got a great script. Julianne Moore is attached to star, and Joe Rubin is attached to direct, and we don't have a producer on it.
So this was the first time that we'd received that type of call, and then we read the script and just absolutely fell in love with it and completely saw Julianne Moore in the title role and got very excited about coming on board. In the original script, the movie took place in Boston, but the city really wasn't integrated into the script fully as a character. And that gave us the idea to really build that city into the movie as a character in the movie. So we scouted Boston and New York after a lot of discussion, sort of narrowing it down to those two, and we fell in love, no surprise, with New York City.
Well, we wanted to shoot The Forgotten in New York because it's just such an exciting visual city. You can almost put your camera anywhere and it's just going to be visually arresting.
And then another decision that we made sort of early on is that the movie, though, does not take place in Manhattan. It's mostly set in Brooklyn.
There are parts of Brooklyn, like Dumbo, which is underneath the Manhattan Bridge and the Brooklyn Bridge. They look the way they looked for the last 100 years or something.
You see tall buildings across from the Brooklyn Bridge, and there's always a little taste of New York, sort of overlooking Brooklyn, which is sort of, a little bit metaphoric for things that go on with the movie, because we obviously have these other beings that are potentially looking down on our main character, the way that Manhattan sort of overlooks Brooklyn.
Good.
Probably the strongest human emotion is the connection between a mother and her child. So you pit that against an evolved, advanced alien force who's trying to destroy that connection. Who wins? The film is about who wins. And Julianne Moore plays Telly Paretta, who is just a human. He's just one of us, against this amazing, powerful alien race. But she turns out to be unstoppable. And Julianne Moore is unstoppable. I mean, she's a stunning actress, and she makes this fight a fight for all of us.
Well, the reason that I responded to it is that it's a very classic, sort of exciting psychological thriller. But this one has a particularly human element. I mean, the issues at hand are really about how we feel about our children and our family members and the people that we love. And so that's when I think these kinds of films are most engaging, when there is something that truly is about how people feel.
It was the easiest casting job I ever had, just because people want to work with her. You know, if you're in a scene with Julianne, the work, you're starting off with a huge advantage in the work being good.
I say his name every day. Just say it so you can hear it. Lauren, say it.
Lauren.
One of the things we wanted to do with the movie is to have sort of a buried love story in there. I mean, it's very subtle, but the idea is, in my mind, that there may even be a future for these two characters. You know, if you came back to them a year later, in my mind, they're going to be together.
Well, I usually get to play the arsehole boyfriend, and this one, he actually turns out to be a bit of a hero. So it's something of a new thing for me, and it's a good meaty hero as well. You know, who has to struggle throughout the film to change himself and to overcome impossible odds.
We knew his work from his brilliant work on The Wire, but also he had been in Chicago. We got an early look at Mona Lisa Smile, where he played Julia Roberts' Italian professor boyfriend wonderfully. And so the idea looked good on paper, it felt good to us. When we met him, there was instant chemistry with him and Julianne.
Well, you know, Dominic has the ability to be very kind of guy-like, and you know, very much like a hockey player and everything, and also be incredibly emotional, and that's not such an easy thing to do.
He's somebody that we can immediately relate to, and that's very important in this kind of film, because you have to believe in the reality before you can believe in what's going on above the reality, the super reality of this film.
We were looking for an actor to play the alien in the movie. And what we knew is that we had to find an actor, Linus may not like this, but who has a slightly otherworldly quality built into who he is.
It's threatening and ominous, but not in an obvious way. I think it's because you don't understand. You don't know. He's an element of unknown within the piece. What is this person? It doesn't fit, but it's intriguing. So that's scary, because I think a lot of the time what we find scary is what we don't know and what we can't relate to and understand. So this character seems to embody something that you can't get your head around, and it's bending a lot of the rules of time and space and everything. So it's very unnerving.
The actor Linus Roche had a very challenging role, because he has to play an alien as if the alien is a human, but with slight hints and clues that there's something else there, that there's something behind this mask of humanity.
In a strange kind of way, I just have to kind of walk a straight line through it and let the audience sort of respond to it, rather than me trying to tell the audience what they should feel.
I don't know if the idea came from Linus or from Joe Rubin, that he has two different color contact lenses on the whole movie, and in every shot you can see one eye will be a little green or one eye will be a little blue, and it's just this very subtle, sort of slightly off thing.
It's finished now. End it. It's not over.
Gary Sinise is an actor's actor. It brings a lot of class to a project. So he was someone where we just said the name. Someone said, how about, it was actually Todd Garner said, how about Gary Sinise for months? And we were all like, yeah.
You know, he's a very kind of internal character, very thoughtful. I've played some characters that are, you know, very aggressive, and what was interesting about this guy is that he's a doctor. He's a very studied, very even, very emotionless kind of The emotions have been taken out of this character a bit, and he's very analytical, and you know, he thinks of things in terms of science and not emotion.
And ultimately, he's playing a character who's morally compromised, who's involved with the aliens. And we wanted an actor who not only was a really strong actor, but who is so sympathetic that you're less likely to pick up on the idea that there's more to his character than seems to be at first.
You never had a son.
This is insane.
For the role of Julianne Moore's husband, you know, we wanted somebody who you sort of would expect would be around the entire movie. And a key scene for Anthony Edwards' character is the scene when he doesn't recognize Julianne Moore, his own wife. And we needed somebody who you were just going to buy so thoroughly in that scene, in that moment.
You know, I basically kind of retired after ER and was living here in New York, and said to my manager, well, if it shoots in New York and I don't have to work too much and I can work opposite a really talented and beautiful redheaded actress, then I'll do it.
I know your wife.
Oh, right, got it. Not married. Wrong Jim.
It's very important, again, in a film that is wildly speculative, like The Forgotten, to have people like our wonderful cast who can anchor you right into your everyday world.
I'm not one of those actors that goes to the mental hospital to pay a mental patient. I'm pretty good at imagining things. But I met a woman called Vicki Burton, who is NYPD CSI, and she said to really listen to your instinct, which I would imagine makes women even more effective detectives, because I think we're more accustomed to, paying attention to our instinct.
This woman is playing a New York City cop, and she has to have a toughness about her and a believability about her. And we wanted somebody that an audience, would automatically like and care about and be shocked at when they were pulled into the sky.
You're fine. You're stop.
That was the moment we were most concerned about in the film, because we didn't know whether the audience would buy it, whether the audience would get it, or whether they would think it was unintentionally funny. And it's ironic, but kind of a good lesson, that was the moment that we were most worried about not working, because that turns out to be the best moment in the movie for the audience.
I mean, in a funny way, the effects in the movie are pretty straightforward in the sense that we wanted them to feel real. I mean, what we really wanted in this movie was, as crazy as it gets in some ways, that it never loses a basic sense that it could happen.
So that was basically the driving force behind the visual effects, was to basically not take away from the story, but actually to enhance it in the key storytelling moments. The plan was to go out and shoot Alfre Woodard, and we were going to have her mime her action, or at least simulate the action of being pulled back. And then the plan was to eventually transition from her to a stunt double who was actually getting pulled on a cable, probably 10 to 15 feet back. And then we were going to transition the stunt person getting pulled 10 to 15 feet back with a CG computer-generated version of Alfre Woodard, which would then go the rest of the distance and disappear into the sky. And what we found is, after we actually photographed this stunt double, that we just didn't have the violence that the film wanted to have, that Joe was looking for. It's violent, but there's no way you can pull a person physically that fast and have it have the impact that we wanted for this particular shot.
You're fine. You're stop.
Technically, what we had to do for this particular shot was we knew that we had to have a cabin that was going to explode into the air. What we didn't want was a typical explosion that you commonly see, which is that of fire and pyrotechnics. So we wanted this explosion to be free of smoke and free of flames. So we knew we had to basically create a miniature, which would then be either ripped away with cables and pulled, as well as maybe having air rams blast it open. We ended up actually taking this quarter-scale version of the cabinet and actually hanging it upside down. We thought that by hanging it upside down when it exploded open, rather than just use the effects of air pushing it and cables pulling it, that we also use the force of gravity, and that would give us a much more natural feel. The rest was done in post.
You know, we got blueprints, and that's what we built our computer model on. We got the actual height of Julianne Moore, how big her shoes were, all that stuff, so that we know exactly how tall she is relative to the space and relative to the people next to her. And you know, same with Dominic West and the Patalis character, we had all the proper measurements for them. And once that was done, we were really, at that point, able to figure out exactly where the two actors needed to be on stage. And when she would lean in, we had kind of a little green pole that she leaned into, because she was leaning into the character in the chair, which, you know, he gets ripped up, so we couldn't actually have her be right next to him.
They're listening.
The T-bone shot, as we refer to it, was a lot of fun to work on. Actually, we knew that we wanted this side impact crash. We wanted to feel as if we were actually inside the car, and we wanted to feel what that visually. We wanted to feel what that might be like to actually be in there. So the only way we could actually do this, obviously, we couldn't have an actress in the car, so we had to shoot it against the green screen. So we shot one element of Julianne Moore sitting in a car over a green screen background, and she would just react, and we had lighting effects that were on the set to simulate the headlights of the oncoming Suburban. The most challenging aspect of this shot was actually capturing the photography for the background plate, which is the actual NSA vehicle racing towards us.
We actually wound up using sort of a version of an old gag, which is running the film in reverse, where they started with the Suburban right up to the camera, and then the camera car and the Suburban basically go backwards.
In order to do a shot like that, it's not something like you just go out on location that day and say, okay, here's what we're planning, let's do it. It's something that you actually have to put a little more thought into, and we actually produced a video test, which was kind of the blueprint, the guide for that particular shot.
Which was great, because when we were on location, we could pull out this previs, and everyone got what we needed to do. We shot the plate in reverse, and you know, the ramp up of how the two cars came together it was all worked out in advance.
You know, at the point of impact, there's that violent camera shake. There's that tempered glass. Essentially, there's the shatters across the surface, and that was a piece of glass artwork, essentially, that we composited into the shot. And you know, that's part of it too, where you are doing various tests and speed tests and manipulating the background plate, so it's just so that point of impact just feels impactful enough.
You okay?
Yeah.
When you're making movies that don't fit into one category or the other, there's all sorts of different excuses. You're like, well, it's, you know, not everyone might have loved it, but it was really arty. Or, well, you know, no one went to see it, but it got good reviews. But with a thriller, it either works or it doesn't.
Movies are shot completely out of order, and there are visual effects that aren't put in until months later. And you sort of hope and pray that it's going to be as scary and as visceral experience as the movie in your mind. And the nice thing about The Forgotten is that it actually exceeds that.
Where is my son?